the expectations are growing great. And so we as solution providers in these areas need to make sure that we're not only measuring experiences, but we're creating them. We're creating the easy button for our customers and our consumers to utilize our products, our services, and our solutions.
Welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast, where we delve deep into the life sciences industry and uncover effective strategies, innovations, and future trends. Your host, Axtria's Jasmeet Soni, engages highly acclaimed leaders in discussions focused on directing commercial success in the life sciences industry. Whether you're transforming your commercial success strategy or just craving dynamic discussion, this is the show for you.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Jasmeet Soni and welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast brought to you by Axtria. Our goal with this show is to bring to you effective strategies, innovations, and most importantly, people who are driving improved business and patient outcomes within the life sciences industry. I'm excited about today's conversation as it centers around a very important topic of the experience economy. And we are going to talk about its key stakeholders and the role of data and analytics. We have a veteran MedTech commercial leader to share his perspectives. I'm so happy to introduce Terry Coutsolioutsos. Terry has over 30 years of medical device and technology experience across multiple market segments and specialty verticals. He has worked at companies like Siemens Healthineers, Abbott Vascular, and Boston Scientific, and has built a long and successful career in sales, marketing, commercial operations, and strategic corporate accounts. Most recently, Terry led the marketing, commercial operations, and communications teams for Siemens Healthineers North America, where his team was chartered with cohesively positioning and marketing the company, demonstrating value to key decision-making customer segments, and supporting a harmonized approach to sales operation excellence. Terry graduated with a BA in Business Administration and Finance from Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio. He's originally from Western Pennsylvania, but lives with his family in Sarasota, Florida. Terry, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Jasmeet, thank you for having me. Honored to be here and wishing you the very best.
Absolutely. Terry, let's get directly into the topic of the experience economy. There's a lot of talk about it. Why has it become so important, not just for the MedTech industry, but for every business to be successful?
Well, it's a great question. There's a lot of big drivers in our personal lives that I think are creating huge expectations as well as raising the bar in the business-to-business environment. So we talk about an experience economy and why it's become so important. And I'll just kind of trail right back into our own personal lives around experiences. So in the US, when you order food from DoorDash or Uber Eats, think about the experience that you get from just a simple aspect of ordering a meal from an online application. When you have an experience in ordering your food, when the restaurant got its order, when the restaurant completed the meal, when your driver is picking it up, when your driver is on its way, and when your driver has dropped it off. And so when you think about just a simple thing like ordering a pizza, what a great experience that application has provided you along the way. So it helped you acquire what you're looking for. It kept you up to date as to the process of the manufacturing of that product. It told you when it was being delivered, and it told you when it got there. And so when you think about those things, having that transparency in a consumer-driven world, those same things drive over into our business world. And so when we think about life sciences with medical devices and medical technologies, the expectations are growing great. And so we as solution providers in these areas need to make sure that we're not only measuring experiences, but we're creating them. We're creating the easy button for our customers and our consumers to utilize our products, our services, and our solutions. And we're measuring how well the impact is being provided. We're measuring the value that we deliver. And we have a better understanding of how that comes full circle when it comes to the customer making another decision around our products and services. So do they stay on track with us, or do they leave us and go for another another solution, another type of product, or do they stay connected with us because they liked what we delivered, they found value, and they want to continue using that value?
Thanks for setting the stage, Terry. I loved your example of pizza delivery. Now that we know that experience economy really matters as it does in the consumer world, can you talk about any trends around it, either the ones that are driving the experience economy or the trends that are impacting the evolution of the experience economy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say over the last 3 or 4 years, the acceleration around the experience economy has really picked up greatly. When we were all going through the pandemic and we were needing to stay at home and restaurants were closed and stores were closed and things were being delivered, just think about how COVID and the pandemic has had one huge impact on just the digital transformation around things that we used to do every day, like simple things like going to a grocery store. You can talk about how aging demographics around baby boomers and Gen X and millennials and Gen Z, and how that is also driving towards a more experience-driven economy, in terms of being able to use and touch buttons on your phone and have mobile access. Those are also things that are being driven. The data behind, a Gartner survey showed that in a business-to-business environment, and so I'm not talking about when somebody's buying a pair of tennis shoes or a pizza online. I'm actually talking about a business-to-business engagement, is that 54% of millennials prefer a non-sales rep related relationship with their service provider. So they prefer an asynchronous relationship versus having a sales rep or a seller be involved in that sales process. So there's that being driven. COVID is also, as I said earlier, driving a greater separation from a manual-driven economy to a digital-driven economy. Those are the key things in today's trending, where the experiences need to be maintained. And so when people are used to the human interaction, they're looking for things to happen in a faster, more efficient, easier manner. So customers want to be engaged where, when, and how they prefer. And so that puts a lot of stress on any type of vendor or solution provider, because the demographics in today's age in terms of digital acceptance or non-digital acceptance, or how people want to be engaged, whether it's personally or digitally or asynchronously. And so we as solution providers need to have multiple platforms for multiple channels to deal with a very complex buying democracy on how they want to engage the buyers today. So the biggest trends are millennials are becoming a greater percentage of the workforce. So 75% of the workforce will be millennial within the next 5 years. COVID and the pandemic has driven an accelerated digital transformation on how people acquire goods and services. Those are the two biggest things that are driving this new experience economy into a faster changing adaptive world.
That makes a lot of sense, Terry, especially because, as you said, 75% of the workforce is going to become millennials, and younger demographics are going to be much more important as a customer to the life sciences, MedTech, pharma sector. Now, switching gears a little bit, as we know, for any business, the two most important stakeholders are customers and employees. Let's first talk about customers. What key customer experience changes do you see on the customer side that MedTech companies must try to solve?
It's a great question. I think, to keep it in a very simple manner, is that in the MedTech life science arena, as we're developing new product solutions and services for our customers to engage with, from a customer experience perspective, we need to make sure that we are designing these products to actually deliver impact and value. And we need to make sure that those messages are being, parlayed into the customer from the very beginning of when they're actually looking to acquire our goods and services, all the way through the purchasing, the integration, the implementation. And most importantly, we need to make sure that we're helping our customer measure the value and the impact that those services and solutions bring. So when I think about the value that we need to be creating for our customers, is if there's value on a clinical an operational or a financial angle. We need to make sure that we're designing the customer experience wrapped around those promises that we've told on the front side, that we're actually making sure and measuring on the back end of those solutions and providing those services at the end of the day. Healthcare has been tremendously successful, a huge marketplace. And I think as we go through, there are a lot of macroeconomic demands on our customers. They're under constant financial stress. And we need to make sure that, what we're delivering and what we've been promising actually come together. And we have to put those data pieces together in a really simple way where our customers understand the impact that we're making.
And that makes a lot of sense, Terry. The impact and value framework that you just described is very simplistic, but it is what is going to drive the change. There are a lot of critical changes on the customer side, as you said, and I totally agree. In fact, I would say these changes are required immediately if companies have to meet the demands of today's customers. On the other hand, one of the biggest challenges that companies face today is generational diversity in the employee base. With each generation having its own set of preferences and behaviors, how do organizations adapt to serve these changing needs and provide the employee experience and keep them engaged?
That's the $24 million question, Jasmeet. And if I had the perfect answer, I think I'd be sitting on an island somewhere that I bought. But here's what I will tell you, that it's one of the toughest things from an operational perspective or an IT perspective that companies face in today's marketplace. Number one, understanding that you're dealing from, baby boomers to Gen X to, millennials to Gen Z and to Gen Y. I mean, you almost have 4 to 5 different discrete, different generational segments that companies have to deal with. They all have a different perspective of what's worked in the past because they all have a different history on how they grew up in the marketplace. They all have a different acceptance in terms of technology of what they can work with today. So it really is about balance and blending things and really trying to understand when you're making investments in automation, when you're making investments in process and digital transformation around those processes, that you're working with those key discrete groups to making sure that you're doing the best job possible and answering the needs of all those different segments. Needless to say, you're not going to please everybody. And that's the first thing that you're probably going to have to realize that when you walk into an exercise like this, that there's no way to actually have 100% acceptance and excitement around any type of digital transformation. And so I think you need to work with the 80%, 20% rule to make sure that, you're working to create an environment where you're going to have the largest amount of impact. You're going to be able to impact the largest part of the audience around any type of transformation or experience that you're trying to create. And it's really about listening too. So once those things have been launched, you've actually taken off with those new digital transformations or those new IT aspects, is you have to stay close to your customer base or your employee base to make sure that you're understanding what's working well, what's not working well. Do you have the right competency channels or the training channels in place to make sure that your employees have the information needed to actually go through the transformation? Are you listening as they go through that transformation for iterations and improvements? And do you really understand what's working well and what's not working well so that you can quickly adapt to those situations to make sure that you're making the impact across the board as much as possible?
So listen and adapt, the 2 words, I got that. And, it's amazing because, as you said, you cannot please everyone. So if you go by 80 and 20 rule, you have to listen to a large employee base and adapt quickly to make an impact. Now, every leader is dealing with rapidly changing employee needs and preferences and trying to cope with a variety of needs across generations. Now, I must assume that data and insights play a key role. Can you tell us more about the role of data and insights in driving the customer and employee experience?
It's probably the foundation of everything that goes around beyond the transformation or the experience you're trying to create. Data, to me, is probably the second most important thing that you need to design in these processes. The world is moving at paces which none of us ever thought possible before. And so having the data and the information organized in a fashion, in a way that your insights can actually be on a daily basis, so that you understand what's being used, what's not being used, what's working and what's not working, to the point almost where that data is reoccurring so often and with such frequencies that you can actually learn from that data and actually start almost making predictions about what the future looks like as well. So I would say that the role of data in today's marketplace, whether it's on the customer side or internally on the employee side, it is, a foundational aspect that needs to be designed into every transformation that you're building. It should provide, first of all, the data should provide you insights into your blueprint on what you should be doing. It should be providing reoccurring affirmation, whether things are working or not working. So is the quality there? Is the quantity there? Is the adoption happening? Is the impact that was designed into the process being delivered? And then at the end of the day, it should be helping to drive those greater efficiencies that we're designed to do around KPIs, whether it's internally operational efficiency, financial efficiency. If we're talking about healthcare and customers, we're talking about clinical and quality. All those things are very important, and they are wrapped around data. And without data, we will not understand whether those experiences are being delivered upon their intentions or not.
So data is the foundation. Now, I do want to ask you a question that might sound dumb, but for the audience, I do want to ask this. You said data is probably the second most important thing. What is the first most important thing?
Well, I think the first most important thing would be your goal, your objective, or whatever your transformation is. So, to me, it's, whether you're designing an automation, whether you're designing a process transformation, so whatever the quality or the service or the product that you're delivering, to me, is the number one. The data should be there, recording, what that intention looks like and whether or not it's being successful or not. So that's why I say it's the second most important thing beyond what you're actually, there to deliver on.
And that makes a lot of sense, because if your objectives are not clear, you don't know what data to collect and how to analyze that. That
Correct.
makes absolute sense. I'm sure there are quite a few challenges that organizations face. Their inability to collect data, analyze, and use the data to drive the experience. Can you talk about some of these challenges?
And I think some of the biggest challenges have been wrapped around the data, the complexity of the organization, the multiple sources of information, the multiple users of information, can sometimes get in the way of, what we're trying to actually understand. And a lot of people that use information actually don't own the data that they're acquiring. So it takes a great amount of collaboration. It takes a great amount of understanding the structure and the processes to actually acquire the data, integrate the data, measure the quality of the data. Then you have to actually, once you've done those three things, you can then begin to actually, architect the data and analyze the data. So it really is a very complex exercise. And the bigger the organization, the more complex channels of data that come in. And the fact that the data governance structure typically does not cover just one part of the organization. It actually involves multiple parts of the organizations. I'll give you an example where you have functional different reporting structures. So you might have financial people owning data, operational people owning data, marketing people owning data, sales people owning data. And at the end of the day, you're trying to pull all those functional verticals into one data governance structure. And we all have to find a way to collaborate and unite around the common vision of what we're trying to deliver in order to put that data in a place where we can actually make sense of it. Timely, integrated, and then more importantly, what do we actually use this data for? And it should be insightful and actionable as well.
I love the clarity with which you describe the challenges that organizations and leaders face. In my last question, I want to talk about leadership. With all these changes, how do you think leaders must adapt? Do you think there needs to be a change in the mindset?
I definitely think there needs to be a change in the mindset of leadership. And I can look back on my leadership career for the past 20 or 30 years. And, there's been all sorts of different ways leaders have been brought to, be more impactful to their teams. I think, first of all, we all need to understand when it comes to leadership, we need to bring empathy to the table. So we need to bring an understanding. We need to bring a clear vision of what and why for our people. Number one. We also need to understand from a leadership perspective is that we talked about how the generational diversity has really created some complexity around technology and adoption, but it's also created some complexity around how to actually lead that generational diversity as well, because baby boomers have a different need than a Gen X, and a Gen X will have a different need than a millennial, and a millennial will have a different need than a Gen Z. And so each of these people really have things that, generationally in those different segments have key things that are important to them as individuals, as professionals, as teammates, and part of an organization. And so as a leader, you really need to dig into your people. You need to have a deep understanding. You need to bring empathy to work like you've never brought up before. And so you need to be listening more, speaking less, but speaking, when you do speak, you need to speak with impact. You need to be delivering what needs to be done, why it needs to be done that way, and bring that inclusive empathy leadership component to the table every single day. Because the wonderful part about the generational diversity is the diversity itself. So we can talk about how challenging it is to manage and lead that generational diversity. But at the same time, if you can be inclusive in your approach with your people, you will bring and you'll be able to optimize that diversity and have it be an asset versus a liability.
Terry, that's a great perspective on leadership, and you emphasized on empathy, and I can see how important is that. Everyone talks about listening and empathy and inclusiveness because it's seen as one of the things that you need to do, but not much is in action, and that actually starts with empathy. So I love that you emphasize on empathy. Thanks for all those insights, Terry. Before we go, I would like to summarize our discussion so the audience has some key takeaways. So what I understand is, one, the internal and external work environment has changed drastically, and they have been driven by 2 or 3 key areas. You talked about generational demographic shifts, then COVID, which has made our virtual worlds come alive, and the rapidly changing buyer and employee preferences. 2, business demands and needs are shifting, so commercial teams need to have the data to understand the market and organizational preference, and customer and employee experiences need to be measured and addressed because implications are significant. And 3, today's organization needs to have a transformation mindset, specifically around how to adapt to environmental and market changes and empower teams to adapt to the external changes around them. Is there anything else you would like to add to the summary?
Yeah, I would just say at the end of the day, we've been in the most exciting, dynamic periods of our life. And the world, whether it's professionally or personally, is moving faster than ever. And so we just need to make sure that we keep our eyes and our ears open, so we're taking in the information as fast as possible. But we're also listening and we're understanding so that we are better able to be agile and adapt to the changes around us so we can make a greater impact into the people that we touch and the customers that we interact with every day.
Absolutely. Terry, thanks for sharing your knowledge and expertise in this space. It is amazing how quickly the experience economy has become such a critical thing. But on the other hand, life sciences companies continue to struggle to cater to the needs of their customers and employees. They must evolve using data and need to have the right mindset to adapt quickly. You provided some amazing perspectives that I'm sure our audience will find valuable. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Jasmeet.
To the audience, you are the most important part of the show. The tremendous success that we are seeing is because of you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and tune in soon for the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast. If you loved this episode, please share with friends and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. For more information, visit lifesciencespodcast.com. Until next time.